Welcome to Module 3 of Advanced Economics. In Module 3, we turn to macroeconomic policy. Now, in last module, we talked about the invention of the economy. And we talked about how the economy as a concept was kind of used to make sense of the Great Depression. Now, one of the first questions people asked in this time period, as macroeconomics was kind of invented, is what can governments do to make sure events like the Great Depression don't happen again? And so there are two different types of macroeconomic policy we're going to study in this course. One of them is fiscal policy, that's going to be this unit. And then next module, we're going to talk about monetary policy. Fiscal policy is talking about the actions that can be taken by legislatures, and monetary policy talks about the actions of central banks to change the money supply. So when we talk about fiscal policy, and really macroeconomic policy in general, the main goal is to smooth out a lot of the fluctuations in the business cycle. If you study American history, there are all of these wild booms and busts, which are really painful, these prolonged periods of either really high inflation or sometimes unemployment rates that are sky high. And the goal of macroeconomic policy is to make sure that we really don't want those happening too often. We prefer a smoother trajectory of increased economic growth without all of the ups and downs and ups and downs. So fiscal policy done by legislatures, you can think of two main levers which can affect the economy. And first we're going to study the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model at the beginning of the unit to think about how these levers are going to change the economy. The first lever is government spending. Governments can increase or decrease their spending to try to get the economy producing at the right rate given the time period. And the other one is changes in the taxation level. So governments can increase taxes if they want to cool down an economy that's overheating, or decrease taxes to give the economy a boost and get people spending again. So according to kind of standard Keynesian theory, if you can time government spending right, or changes in tax policy right, that's going to smooth out these fluctuations. But the key is timing. You have to do it at just the right time so that when people's confidence is flagging, you give it a boost. When people are overconfident, you kind of calm the economy down. But there are also a lot of criticisms that people have historically had of fiscal policy. And a lot of them have to do with the people that are performing fiscal policy. That's politicians. Now, if you're a politician and you're thinking about when to pull these levers on your desk of when to encourage government spending or decrease government spending, your main incentive is to get reelected. And if you want to get reelected, I'm just going to tell you, decreasing government spending and increasing taxes, what economists recommend doing when an economy is kind of overheating, is not great to get reelected. It's a hard sell when you head back to your constituents and say, well, I really had to because the economy was doing too well. So the people who undertake fiscal policy are most likely to only pursue what's called expansionary fiscal policy, not contractionary fiscal policy, because that's what's likely to get them reelected. And if you have decades and decades of people only doing one kind of fiscal policy and not the other, where that leaves us is with a huge debt, because governments have spent a lot of money and not saved a lot of money. So at the end of this unit, we're going to look at the U.S. government debt, and we're going to examine the U.S. history of fiscal policy over the years. And we're going to ask questions about how fiscal policy should be implemented, when it should be implemented, and what the U.S. should do about this huge government debt, which is kind of ballooned now to $200,000 per taxpayer. The other main question we're going to ask about fiscal policy is whether or not it's really possible to time fiscal policy exactly right. Suppose you're entering a recession. You say, we got to spend some money. We got to get the economy back up and running. If you know anything about U.S. politics, by the time you actually come up with the plan, and by the time you actually get the plan passed through both houses of Congress, and then figure out how to implement the plan, it's going to be a year to 18 months later, and you're going to have a whole new set of problems on your hand, which are different than the ones that you were thinking about at the beginning. So these problems of timing and of political incentives are critical for evaluating fiscal policy as a whole. And that's why you'll be asked at the end of the unit to evaluate fiscal policy as a tool and to set limits for when and how it should be used. Next unit, we'll turn to monetary policy. Until then.